Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event tonight. My name is John Clinton with Penguin Random House, and I have just a few housekeeping items to touch on before I turn things over to tonight's fantastic speakers. First of all, we're fortunate to be co-producing this event with the Intrepid Museum, where Mike Massimino is the Senior Space Advisor. While the museum's temporarily closed, they're hosting a wide array of virtual programs for all ages, including a number of engaging offerings on space science and exploration. You can visit intrepidmuseum.org for more details. As a reminder, please keep your audio muted and video off throughout the session. If you'd like to submit questions, you can email them to our virtual inbox. That's going to be mentioned in the chat, which is it can be activated at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the chat icon. You can also comment along and, of course, show appreciation for our speakers as you see fit throughout in that same chat. For the best viewing experience, if you're on a computer, we suggest finding the Gallery View button in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom window. Once in gallery view, if you hover over any of the black tiles with a name on it, you should see a blue ellipsis. Click on this, find Hide Non-Video Participants. This should clear up your screen so you only see me right now. If you're on a mobile device, you can swipe left to access gallery view, and you can toggle non-video participants by tapping more and going into your meeting settings. I think doing this is definitely helpful because then you'll only see our speakers once they come out onto the digital stage, which I'm going to ask them to do right now. So Scott, Mike, and John, please unmute your audio and start your video. While they're getting settled, I'll mention that Scott Kelly is a former military fighter pilot and test pilot, an engineer, retired astronaut, and a retired U.S. Navy captain. A veteran of 4 space flights, Kelly commanded the International Space Station on 3 expeditions and was a member of the year-long mission to the ISS. He's also the author of the children's books My Journey to the Stars and Endurance, the Young Readers Edition, which is the special Young Readers Edition of his adult bestseller, Endurance. Mike Massimino served as a NASA astronaut from 1996 to 2014. A veteran of 2 space flights to the Hubble Space Telescope, Mike and his crew set team records for spacewalking time, and he became the first person to tweet from space. Mike lives in New York City, where he's a professor at Columbia and an advisor at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. Mike's the author of Spaceman, the True Story of a Young Boy's Journey to Becoming an Astronaut, which is the Young Readers Edition of his adult bestseller. John Rocco is a #1 New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of many acclaimed books for children, including Blackout, a recipient of the Caldecott Honor, and the forthcoming How We Got to the Moon, which will be published this October 6th. Rocco's illustrated the covers for Rick Riordan's internationally bestselling series Percy Jackson and the Olympians, among other Riordan titles. So we're going to be dropping a link in the chat throughout to a special page on barnesandnoble.com where you'll be able to find all of the books I just mentioned. So with all that, I'm now going to get out of here, and I'll turn things over to John Rocco.
Thank you, John. Well, first I want to say thank you to Penguin Random House for putting this together, and the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum complex for co-hosting this event. I'd also like to thank Barnes & Noble for handling all the sales of our books, or hopefully the sales of our books. And there's a link to purchase the books on the event page. Now, with that out of the way, hi guys.
Hello.
It's great to meet you virtually in this space, and I'm so excited to be here and have you here to talk about all things space and books. Scott, your Young Readers Edition of Endurance came out just pretty recently, the paperback version, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. The paperback's pretty new.
Yeah, so that's a great way to read this book. I like hardcover myself, but fantastic read. You really get the sense of being in the International Space Station. And Mike, your book, Spaceman, just came out, the Young Readers Edition.
Yep.
Somewhat similar to the adult version, but more focused on your childhood experience of
Yeah, I changed some things up. I had gotten the initial book, the original book, which this is what that one looks like, just in case you're wondering. That came out a few years ago, and a lot of young people read it. I got a lot of nice notes from parents and teachers and young people that they liked the book, and I thought, well, maybe we can try to refocus it to be even more meaningful and relatable to younger people. So some stories were changed, and some came out, and some new ones were put in. So it's pretty much a rewrite. I think it's fairly new, and the way I look at it is much different than the first book.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to listen to you read the book,
Mhm.
which was great because it was like you're right here in my studio just reading your book,
Mhm.
and really enjoyed it so much. Both of the books.
I'm glad you did.
And in fact,
That must have been like nails on the chalkboard.
Oh no, it's great. Give him a break, Scott.
Hey,
but I do want to say,
we're classmates.
We know each other a long time.
yeah, you're sardines.
Scott had hair and my hair was a different color when we first met. Yeah, a long time ago.
I do
You
want
know,
to
I cleaned
mention.
out my locker. I cleaned out my locker like 10 years ago. I found in the gym. I found a comb in there.
I
bet that's worth money. You know, your comb would be worth.
We digress.
Yeah.
I just want to say I love this cover. I love your covers as well. This one's an illustration, so for me, an illustrator, which was done by Courtney Autumn Martin, who's a fellow Rhode Islander.
Cool.
And I was speaking to her today about this cover. Beautiful. I'm sure you love it.
I think it's great. Yeah, I like it. It's got a little kid with a baseball bat and everything. That's me as a little kid. That's me as a astronaut there. And yeah, I like it. I think it was really well done. I was very happy with what you came up with.
Yeah, and I like how they changed up. Oh, wrong way.
Yeah.
Tilted you a little bit and gave it a little more color, which was nice for the kids version. So
yeah, that was a great picture that Marco Grob, a New York-based photographer, very famous photographer, took.
And were you hanging from the ceiling when they took the photo?
No, he was.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. I think they just turned the picture 90 degrees.
So I want to talk about you guys both. I mean, a lot of our listeners, hello listeners, thank you for joining us. They know a lot about you. And you've done many, many, many interviews over the last decade, talking about your time in space and your experiences. But I know that you both worked on missions to Hubble, servicing missions. And your first mission, Scott, was to service Hubble. Yes, is this
Yep.
the patch?
That is.
Yeah.
I think I designed that. I
Well,
can't
there
remember.
you
It was so long ago. I kind of forgot.
You were the only rookie. I'm sure you designed it.
Yeah.
Probably.
Is that how it goes? Rookies design the patches?
That's what I was told when I was a rookie.
When I was a
think it
Boy Scout,
depends.
they told me go get the left-handed smoke bender, and so I've been still looking for that. So I just want to talk a little bit about Hubble, because 2 weeks ago was the 30th anniversary of Hubble, and I know, Mike, from your book you talk about it a lot. Obviously, both your missions were up to Hubble, but the significance of that piece of hardware to us as human beings on Earth, beyond just beautiful desktop images that we get. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that. Well, I think one of the things that makes Hubble very popular is that it does give beautiful images that everyone can appreciate. It's not just for people with a PhD in astronomy that can appreciate what the telescope does. It's everybody. It shows us the beauty of the universe and answered some big questions and created questions that we didn't know what the answers to, like the finding of dark energy, which was an energy they were trying to categorize the expansion rate of the universe, and they found out instead of slowing down, the universe is actually accelerating, and they don't know where that energy is coming from, so they call that dark energy, and they awarded a Nobel Prize for that discovery done with Hubble. So it's made some amazing discoveries, Nobel Prize worthy discoveries, and also shows us just how beautiful that the universe is. Things we never. The ultra deep field is one of my favorite images. If people want to take a look at that, it's a section of the sky that they thought there was nothing there. We couldn't see anything, and so they pointed Hubble at it, and they were able to look really, because there's nothing in a way they could see way back billions of years. So pretty amazing what the telescope has done, and both Scott and I had a chance to participate in those missions. So we got a chance to work with that team and see what an incredible group of people they are.
Yeah, it's to me, that's just so mind blowing when you're looking at an image like that, that you're looking at history. You know, you're just seeing millions and billions of years into the past.
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's a time machine, because when you say something is, you know, it's like 13.5 billion light years away. I think it's about as far as the telescope's been able to see so far anyway. That light started its journey. You're looking back in time 13 billion years in the past. Right. So these are looking at galaxies when they first formed, really baby galaxies in the first forming of the universe. So that's what it is. It's really a time machine in a lot of ways, because you're looking so far back in the past at the light that started coming at us, just reaching us now, but it started its journey billions of years ago. So, and it also looks at stuff a lot closer, but that, you know, that aspect of the time travel portion of it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you both for fixing it.
You're welcome. Glad we didn't break
I didn't
it.
touch it.
Scott, you've spent a lot of time in space. I mean, 520 days, and I did some math because I love math. You've flown at least 218 million, miles through space during your 4 missions. The last one being a year-long mission on the International Space Station, or actually it was 4 missions, right? Combined, 4 expeditions.
Yeah.
And that's the equivalent of, I mean, flying to the sun and back, or even 436 round trips to the moon, which, you know, that's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of traveling. I know we're all traveling around the sun, but while we're doing that, you were really going.
And I didn't get any frequent flyer miles for it, unfortunately.
Nothing. The ISS doesn't give out frequent. Yeah. Well, okay. So this leads me to another question, and I know you've talked about this in the past, but I'm so fascinated by it. The difference between flying into space on the shuttle, which we were able to do up until 2011, and now the Soyuz trip, which is a much different experience. Can you speak to that a little bit, since you've done both?
Yeah, it's you know, it is much different. The you know, the Soyuz was designed for really one purpose, and that was to put people in space and you know, dock with the space station. It's simpler. It's less operator intensive, especially when you get you know, well, actually in all phases, it's really much less operator intensive, especially as an American astronaut. And for me, being the space shuttle pilot and then later the commander of a space shuttle Endeavour, you know, as the second flight engineer, my role was much different. So, you know, simpler vehicle, you know, still risky. The Soyuz has had 2 fatal in-flight accidents, just like the space shuttle had, but it has an emergency escape system. I always felt a little bit safer actually in the Soyuz because of that escape system. But the shuttle is much more complex. It is the most complicated aerospace vehicle ever built. It can do multi missions, different types of missions, whether it's launching a payload, retrieving a satellite in space, repairing it, building the International Space Station. It launches like a rocket. It's a, you know, it can be turned into an orbiting laboratory, and it lands similar to an airplane, but it's a big glider. So it takes a lot more work, effort, coordination by more people involved, because it is so much more complicated. Like I said, the most complicated aerospace vehicle ever built. But the Soyuz has been a workhorse. I mean, since the 1960s, it's
yeah, they haven't changed.
It has not. Well, they change sometimes. I mean, my first flight on the Soyuz was the first flight of a new digital flight control system that they had never flown before. So they do upgrade it. It does have MF, like LED type displays now, and it's really for what it does. It's really good and generally reliable spacecraft.
Right. If it's not broke, don't change it. Don't fix it. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I imagine the experience of flying the two different spacecraft is so different. I mean, the Roscosmos, which is the NASA of Russia, they have so many different rituals that you explained in your book that I found fascinating. Everything from, the stopping on the tarmac on the way out to urinate on the tire for good luck. It's the card game that they would do.
That's actually, the card game is actually a NASA thing. So even though the Russians have a lot of, in general, they're a little bit more superstitious and, a little bit more tradition based, and their space program absolutely reflects that. But NASA has traditions as well. I mean, we play this card game in the crew quarters. It's a low ball poker. Mike, do you remember the name of the game? I think it was
Texas. I think it was Texas Hold'em, wasn't it? It was Texas Hold'em poker.
Yeah, it was some kind of low ball poker where the commander of the crew he had to lose a hand before you could walk out of the building where we get into our spacesuits. The idea being that if the commander lost the card game, then you've used up all your bad luck, and the mission would go well as a result. So we had our own traditions as well. Not as many though.
So, Mike, you climbed up inside the Hubble to make your repairs. You broke off a handle.
Yeah.
He probably left a sandwich in there from Carnegie Deli, I would imagine.
I would never leave that behind. I'd eat that.
Right. I read that you were one of the only astronauts that gain weight in space.
As far as I know, yeah. After the shuttle mission, they weigh in and they take care of when you get out. They take your blood pressure, make sure you're still breathing and all that. And they were shocked that I had gained weight and both of my missions I gained weight.
How much?
A few pounds, not that much. I think what it was is I was kind of a little too light when I went up, and I had to bulk up a little bit after. But I gained a couple pounds, probably about two pounds or so, not too much. But most astronauts, I don't know, Scott, what your case was, but when they told me most astronauts lose a little bit, and they were very very surprised to see that I had gained.
Yeah, Alan Shepard was the first astronaut to gain weight on Apollo 14.
Okay.
Yeah, he gained 1 pound.
Yeah.
Oh, but that might have been leftover pee from his first. Flight.
Who knows? Yeah.
On a mission, it's so hard to use the bathroom in space on a mission that short. It's probably just due to that.
Yeah.
But if we can, let's.
It depends on. Yeah. Did you go to the? Yeah. So if you want to gain weight in space, just make sure you go to the bathroom before the weigh-in, and on the way back, hold it until after, and that'll take care of it.
And you can get into the record books.
Yeah.
So when you got to the point where they said, you know what, we can't get this handle off. You need to get inside this thing. Break it off. What went through your head?
I was very grateful because I knew I could do that. What had happened was we were trying to do this very complex repair, and we had never done anything like this before. Generally, what we had done on Hubble flights was remove an instrument and put a new instrument in its place and take the old one home. But in this one, we didn't have a replacement for it, and we designed a spacewalk with over 100 new tools to remove an access panel and replace a power supply, and then put a different panel on top. And this handrail was blocking access to a few of those screws. There was 111 small screws I needed to remove from the access panel. And that's what we were worried about, because that was the most difficult thing. In addition, also removing the power supply and getting the new one back in and all that. But the handrail removal was just something that it was like a prep of the work site, and it had 4 bolts, but it was not going to come off unless those 4 bolts came out, and I stripped one of the 4. Luckily, I only stripped one of them, and it was on the bottom of the handrail. And we were over an hour. We were troubleshooting this thing, and I didn't think anything was going to work. We had no backup for this. I guess the feeling was even I couldn't mess it up, right? But this is what happens. And then the solution was they did a test up at the Goddard Space Flight Center while we're spacewalking. And the solution was, since it was just one bolt still holding it in, maybe I could grab it from the top and yank it off. And it would take 60 pounds of force to do that. But once I heard that solution, I was relieved. So I was like, let's go, because I knew I could go back there. We had to tape the bottom of it to keep all the debris contained. But I knew that would work, because once we got that out of the way, then it was, I would be able to start over again and get a second chance at it. Other things we were talking about wasn't going to work, was going to change the whole space, and nothing was working. So once we got it out of the way,
you were holding on with the other hand, right? Because I imagine.
Well, I was in a foot. Right? Well, I was in a foot restraint. Yeah, I was. So you want to balance yourself, but my feet were in a foot restraint, so I was pretty stable. And you have your hand. Yeah, you stabilize yourself because you want to get all the energy into that thing to rip it off. But I knew that's something I could do, and I thought it was an ingenious plan. It might seem simple, but it's not something that you would normally think about, because when you break something like that, you're going to create debris, and we would never want to do that. But they had a plan to contain it, and so I was pretty close. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best.
Right. Now, I want to go back to the beginning for both of you in your journeys to becoming astronauts. You were both inspired by Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff, a book. You watched the movie umpteen million times, but you also read the book, and it's interesting to think about books that inspire us to become who we become. I know for me, there's been plenty of books, but my interest in space started with Andrew Chaikin's A Man on the Moon, and he's since become a friend, which is really cool. And I know, Scott, you reached out to Tom Wolfe before you came back from your final mission from the ISS, and then you actually ended up writing a foreword for one of the editions of The Right Stuff.
Yeah, so I when I was on the space station, I reached out to somebody that was able to get his email address, and I sent him an email and let him know how much he inspired me when I was a young college student struggling. I kind of struggled my whole life in school until I read his book, and the way he wrote his creative nonfiction style, or I don't know what it was exactly, but it really spoke to me, and it made me believe that I had things in common with the guys in the book. They were all guys at the time, not anymore, but the astronauts and test pilots in this book. And I thought, if I could just become a good student, maybe I could become a military pilot, maybe a test pilot, maybe quite possibly an astronaut. So on my last mission, I was really, motivated to and interested in talking to him. I sent him an email, and it was so funny. I mean, his response was in very Tom Wolfe fashion, with made up words and and some weird punctuation. And then I talked to him on the phone, and it was one of the most memorable phone calls in my life. Most of it
from
was
the
about
space station.
From the space station. Yeah, I set up a time to call him. He had a lot of questions. It was mostly him asking me questions, but I had the opportunity to ask him some questions as well. And then I when I got back, I met him and I became friends with him. I had lunch with him many times, and then kept in touch with him until he passed away a couple of years ago now, probably almost 2 years ago, I think. It was great. It was so important to me, the inspiration I got from his book. I really think had I not read it, I probably wouldn't have done what I did in my life.
Yeah. Power of books. And Mike,
Mhm.
You went a different route into the space program. You
Mhm.
said, I'm going to go get my education. I'm going to get my doctorate. I'm going to smush my eyeballs. You went through the gamut.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was a different route. I was the movie The Right Stuff is what got me interested. I can remember Neil Armstrong on the moon. I was 6 years old when that happened, and that made me want to become an astronaut as a young boy. But as I got older, I started realizing that something like that is, impossible is what I thought. And how do you do that? And didn't really think much about it until my senior year of college, when The Right Stuff, the movie, came out, and I saw that my senior year, and that got me thinking again about the astronaut program, of how much I loved the space program as a little boy. And I went and got Tom Wolfe's book and read it and loved it, and watched the movie over and over again when it came out. I got a DVD of it back in the day, and then I graduated college. Still didn't do much about this interest I had, but then I decided I needed to do something. The military seemed like a great path, but I thought I'd be better suited to try to go the academic route, and I was interested in going to grad school. So that's what I did. I went to graduate school and started that path. But different than Scott with the military test pilot way. I went the academic engineering route. And
So
then I got, as you said, a lot of things happened. I got rejected 3 times. I think Scott got picked on his first try, but I got rejected 3 times, including a medical disqualification on my 3rd try. And it was for my eyesight. And back then they didn't accept any LASIK. I don't know if LASIK existed back then. So what I did is I was DQ'd. Being disqualified meant it was done. You couldn't even really apply anymore. And until you showed that if you could overcome whatever the disqualification was. So in the case of the eyesight, the only course of action when I thought about it was I had to figure out a way to see better. And I went to some vision training, which was exercises. It's kind of trying to teach your eyes to focus beyond what they're looking at. It's almost like a brain trick in some ways, but somehow it worked, and I was able to pick up a couple lines and get requalified, and was able to at least apply again. But on my 4th try, I was picked up.
Amazing. That's great. I want to talk about some weird, fun facts that I discovered, both from reading your book and just knowing things about you. Scott, you developed calluses on the tops of your feet from being in the space station so long. Can you talk about that a little bit? I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Well, if anyone who's on the space station for a long time, eventually the calluses fall off the bottom of your feet because you're really not using your feet. You use them a little bit when you're running on the treadmill, but that's 30 or 45 minutes a day in shoes. So after a few months in space, the calluses all fall off. It's a little gross when you take your socks off and stuff starts floating around. But eventually you get baby feet, and yeah, they're really, really soft. But what you also get is on the top of your toes, especially your big toes, you get these nasty calluses that kind of look like, I don't know, dinosaur skin or something. And the reason is because the way you hold yourself in place and the way you translate around in the space station is with your feet, particularly your big toe. So your big toe is always underneath a handrail or stuck in some way to steady yourself. You even move around that way once you've been there for a while using your feet. So your hands are free, and you develop these really nasty calluses. I actually have a picture of it, but I don't know if I could find it, but it's pretty gross.
I've seen a picture.
But yeah,
of it. It's gross.
I mean, it's all cracked and
right.
nasty. But
like the bottom of my feet.
Yeah,
I need a
feet
few months in the ISS maybe.
The baby feet are awesome because after my first long flight, no one knew I was on the space station. I come back and you're really sore when you've been up there for a long time and not opposing gravity. So a couple of days after I got back, I go over to this massage, one of those massage places. And at the end of the massage, they sometimes rub your feet, and this woman says to me, she goes, "You have the softest feet I've ever felt in my entire life." And all I said to her was, "Thank you. Very proud of
No
them."
explanation.
And then I just left.
Yeah.
I want to talk
Probably
about
still
writing
wondering
for a minute.
about that guy.
You should have told her how much. Oh, I put a lot of work into my feet to keep them this way.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your process in writing. As someone who writes books, and you guys have written bestsellers, I know, Scott, you kept a journal during your year mission. And Mike, you want to chime in a little bit about how you came to the point where you said, you know what, I'm going to write this story?
Well, I thought I always liked the communication part of our jobs as astronauts, whether it was speaking at a school or doing an interview. I thought getting a chance to work at NASA, working with guys like Scott, getting to fly in airplanes, learning how to spacewalk was just an extraordinary experience, especially the difference that in my life that created, coming from graduate school and academics and then going into the astronaut office. So I enjoyed telling people stories. It was just great. It was so much fun. I've got lots of stories to tell. Scott and we never flew in space together, but just adventures that we had with our class or flying in the airplane or our training. So I always enjoyed that part of it. And I think part of that, I never wrote a lot. I didn't keep a journal or anything, but I like telling stories. And that's what I think my book is anyways, like a compilation of stories. So the way I wrote is I did have a co-writer to help me, someone who was experienced as a co-writer, a guy by the name of Tanner Colby, who's written a bunch of books. He also was a co-writer with for Born a Crime, Trevor Noah's book, for example. So he's a really good co-writer, and he and I spent time together. I would just tell him stories. He would ask me questions, and it would get recorded, and then we had someone transpose those conversations, and then from that we kind of were able to mold the book. So that's the way I went about it the first time, because I was more remembering things and telling stories than I was about keeping a journal. But I had a pretty good memory, and that's how the first book came out.
Sure.
With the second, when I rewrote it, I didn't have a co-writer. I had an editor help me, but I said, well, let me see if I can do this one more independently. And so the stories that I wrote that included there, I just kind of wrote those myself and worked with my editor. A little bit different from the first try to the second.
Yeah, and let's hear it for all the editors and everybody over at Penguin Random House who helped
it was great.
Bring our books to life.
You bet.
They're a heck of a team.
Yeah.
Now, do you have another book you're planning to write at this point?
I would like to. Yeah, we're trying to. The one with this book the first one came out. I remember my agent read it and he was like, "That's really good," but I thought it was going to be funny. So he was going to be like, but all my funny stories didn't make it into the book. I have like my top 10, even I'd say my top 20 funny stories got cut because they didn't, and the book became a little more like an inspirational book, and that kind of. I mean, so it took. I didn't know that was going to happen when we started writing it, but that's the way it came out. That all those stories about not giving up and my experience with Hubble and so on, that was there. But the funny stuff never made it. I think there's part of it is that sometimes you tell a story and there's inflection you can give, and you can work with the audience when you're on stage or something, giving a talk, different than when you're actually writing it. So that would be the next one we want to write. I was talking to my agent about that, about trying to get some of that. I've got a draft and a proposal together. We're trying to see about what we're going to do with it. But the next one I'd like to do is to talk about some of the funny things that happen as an astronaut.
The funny thing happened to me on the way to Hubble.
That is the title I came up with. Well, I have the title before the book, but the funny thing happened to me on the way to the spaceship is one possibility. But that kind of so I would love to do that. We'll see if we can make that one happen.
Yeah, I mean, I literally teared up a couple of times listening to the audio version of your book.
It's good.
I won't get into it, but it's pretty moving stuff.
I appreciate that. I want to recognize. You said the editors. Kevin Doughton was my editor on the first book, and Beverly Horwitz on my second one, and they were just great. And my agent is Peter McGuigan. I don't know if there are three other people listening, but I figured I'd throw them out there. But yeah, there's a lot to it. It's not. you know, I felt like, I know Scott felt, but I felt like, you know, we were trained to do certain things really well by NASA. So there were things we felt comfortable doing. But so I think you need help when you're going to do something that different of try to actually write a book. And so there are people who are experts in that area, and it was just great working with them. So I couldn't have done it without the help of many people.
Yeah. I think, Scott, for your Young Readers Edition, I think you and I have the same editor, Emily Easton.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah. So, and she was kind enough to actually send me this incredible book as well, of all your photographs from space, which I really enjoyed poring over. For me, I would never want to go in a rocket ship. Sorry, I'm claustrophobic.
Really?
I'm very claustrophobic. So for me, that out. You know, like once they zip me in the bag, I'd be like, all right, I'm done. But I would give maybe my left arm to spend 2 hours in the cupola, just looking at Earth, or even do a spacewalk. I don't think I would mind that so much. But yeah, just to be able to look back, see the Earth. I mean, they talk about the overview effect and all of that, but you know, that first, I have a NASA photo that I treasure from the Apollo 8 mission, as they were coming back from the moon, shot through the command module window of the Earth. And it's actually how I pitched my book to Crown, which was, I said, I'm going to show you something that only 24 human beings have ever seen, you know, from this far away. And it worked. They bought it, and I got to do my book. But that view, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. And if there was a cupola that everyone could go and get inside, even if it was, you know, 4K, IMAX, whatever footage, but maybe even if it was live footage, a stream, can we do something like that? We can figure that out.
You know, it's interesting that, you know, there's this company called Bigelow Aerospace, and they when they were going to build their space stations, I don't know what's the status of that now, but they did build an inflatable module. But I went out there to visit Bigelow one time, and he was like, we're not putting any windows in this, because windows are complicated. You know, you put a window in, you know, in anything, and it makes it more, it's challenging structurally and thermally. And so he wasn't going to put any windows, but he was going to put some, you know, 4K cameras outside, and then you know, a TV on the inside to make it seem like the window. And I was just not a fan of that. I was like, you know, you might as well just stay on Earth if that's how you're going to experience the view of Earth. So I think, you know, even, you know, sometimes you look at a 4K or an 8K. I have an 8K TV, and it looks better than the real thing, but it isn't the real thing. So
an 8K TV. Okay. I'm going to start looking over some of these questions that people have sent in. We've got people tuned in from Sydney. I saw someone tuned in from Pakistan, all over the place. And I want to make sure I get to as many of these as possible, because this is why these people have tuned in, not to listen to me talk. You know, this one's probably for you, Scott. The question is, given the amount of time, dedication, or dedicated to maintaining the station, is the ratio of science to maintenance high enough? If not, what could make it higher?
So yeah, there's a certain amount of maintenance that's required of the systems on the space station, and the way, you know, I would say it's probably about about a third of the time is kind of like unplanned maintenance. You know, stuff breaks. A third of the time you're spent doing kind of general like housekeeping. You know, general system maintenance stuff that you expect, and then a third of the time is designated to science. And the way you increase the science is you have more people on board, because the systems, they kind of are what they are. So when we had a crew of 3 on the space station, or when we do, we have like we do now, we have less time for science. And with when we get another crew up there, you'll have 6 people. But then
Sure.
SpaceX will expand our ability to have even more crew members. I think we may go as high as maybe 7.
What's the max? Is it like 12 or 13?
I've been on board when the space shuttle was there with 12. The max, I guess, would theoretically be 13. The issue you have, though, is the more people you have on board,
CO2.
the more stress you put on the life support systems, the toilet, but also more importantly, the carbon dioxide removal system. And the carbon dioxide can get high when you have more people up there, so it's not to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. I've got a question from Joey Johnson. He says, hello, Mr. Massimino. I am 10 years old and enjoying your book. My family used to live across from you in Clear Lake. Do you still have the stuffed Snoopy and your costume from your childhood?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great, Joe. How you doing? So hello to your family. I was, there's a picture of me that is in my book as well. Dressed up as an astronaut for it was a post-Apollo 11 parade that they had at the school during summer recreation. And I had an astronaut costume made by my mom. It was a converted elephant costume, so it was gray without the tail. And I had the plastic helmet and that sort of thing. And I was carrying my Snoopy, my Snoopy dressed up like an astronaut, my astronaut Snoopy. The costume, I don't know what happened to that, but the Snoopy I held on to, I still have him. I brought him to space with me on my second flight, so he got a little time in space as well. So I still have the Snoopy, but the costume, I don't know what happened to that.
I recently came across a photo from my childhood at Christmas with what it says on the box, Moon Car. And this was from 1970, which was the first year, I think it was 70, the first year that the lunar rover went up to the moon.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I cannot, I would probably pay a lot of money to
Look
find
online.
one of those. I've looked. I cannot find, all I could see was the box and it said Moon Car. Anyway, Oscar Escobar asks a great question. He says, many enthusiasts, including myself, are watching this conference. What advice, and this is for both of you, would you give to us so that we can achieve our goals in the astronautic and literature fields?
Well,
yeah.
So in astronautics, I think if you're talking about becoming an astronaut, what I always say is choose a qualifying field that has to be something in science or engineering, math, but choose something you like, because if you like it, you're probably going to do better at it. And NASA wants people that have demonstrated that they do well at their jobs, because your prior performance is a pretty good indicator of what your future performance is going to be. When you look at the amount of people that have the opportunity to fly in space, it's pretty low. But if Mike Massimino could do it, anyone could do it.
There you go, kids.
No, just kidding. Hey, what I say is, if I could do it,
yeah,
anyone can do it. So if you don't try, you have your odds are zero. And as far as writing goals, I was given some really good advice by my wife, who's an incredible writer, before my flight. And what she said is, when people that don't have a lot of experience writing like me, when you generally write like a story, you try to write it in your mind's eye, so kind of what what you think you're seeing, and that sense. But understand, we have 7 or 5. How many senses do we have? Touch, smell, taste. We have a lot more senses.
Right.
Hearing. So, she encouraged me to think about those other senses. And because when you write in using your other senses, then it kind of really draws people into the story more. So that's why in my book, there's a lot about, you might wonder, well, why am I talking about a vibration on a handrail?
Right.
Well, it's because it's a sense, it's touch, and it helps the person feel like they are in the moment. Why do I talk about the smell of the garbage on the space station, or the smell of space, or how the food tastes, or how you feel? Why do I talk so much about headaches and medical issues? It's because of those things. So I think if you want to be a writer, and that's some great advice I got from her, and I think it helped make my book. And when we wrote it with me and my collaborator, Margaret Lazarus Dean, people feel like they're on, at least some people feel like, or have told me they feel like they're actually in space.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I felt like I was at least in the space station. I write and illustrate a lot of children's picture books. And for me, when I'm writing, first I'll write the story, but then I'll take out anything that has to do with visual. And I'm left with, what does it sound like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Those are the things you use in the text, because everything else can be told in the picture. And you don't want to repeat it. Johnny wore a red shirt. You can see that he's wearing a red shirt. Come on. So you just write about, how did Johnny feel about wearing his red shirt, or, so that was great advice. Mike, did you want to speak to this a little bit?
I think Scott said it very well, but I think if you look at the backgrounds of astronauts or people in the space program, it's everything. I flew in space with engineers and test pilots and traditional astronomer, a scientist, but I also flew in space with a geologist. I flew in space with a field geologist who was working in an oil field, Drew Feustel, before he became an astronaut. I flew in space with an oceanographer, Megan MacArthur. And I flew in space with a veterinarian, Rick Linehan. So it's any field of science, engineering, math, military careers, or you can check out the list. You can pick one of those and do what you like, and don't give up. And as far as the writing thing, I think it's kind of interesting that the way that question is posed, because a lot of times it's not one or the other. It's arts or math and science. It's really all of it. And the more that you can be well read and understand as much as you can about other things, particularly for younger people who might be watching this, all your subjects in school are important. I like math and science, especially like physics, more than I did some of the other classes, but those other classes are still important and can really enrich your experiences even in the STEM field. So it's all important, and you find a way to like all of it.
While I got you talking, Tom, who's a 6th grade science teacher, asks, as a fellow Long Islander, you grew up near Grumman, that built the lunar module that went to the moon with many astronauts. What being around that or nearby that, did that have anything to do with your spark and interest in space exploration?
I think for me, I did have my baseball coach after the landing when I was 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. His name was Charles Draghi. Worked for Grumman and used to show us pictures of some like space pictures of some of the stuff he worked on, which was kind of cool. But I think maybe a little bit, but I think it was more, for me, it was more the event of the moon landing really got me interested. And I went to the library and took out books, and I think that was maybe more of it. Because I really wasn't aware of so much of what was going on with right there on Long Island until I got older. So as a little kid, I think it was more about what I saw on TV and what I read about, and going to the library and reading Life magazine and that sort of thing. But so I think maybe as I got older, maybe when I started thinking about jobs, and there was a lot of those types of jobs on Long Island. I think it did play a role, but not I don't think in the early part. More when I got older and in college, was looking for a summer job and those types of things. I realized that Long Island did have a lot of that going on.
Yeah. Now, Michael asks, I got a 5-minute warning here on my question box. That's what I call that. Michael asked, he considers the shuttle to be retired too soon, and it could be used to assemble structures in low Earth orbit and to be sent to the moon or Mars. Do you guys have an opinion about that? I mean, I think it was retired too soon. Unfortunately, it was a budget thing, but I'd like to hear from you guys.
Well, when after the Columbia accident, we took NASA took a very close look at the space shuttle and where we were. Who had Columbia had 3 of our astronaut classmates on that mission. Mike and I, our classmates, Willie McCool, Dave Brown, and Laurel Clark, as well as 4 of our other colleagues. So, which was a horrible accident, a terrible thing. But we looked at the space shuttle and we thought, if we're going to continue to fly this well beyond the amount of time it was really designed for, as far as the number of years each individual shuttle, it was going to cost billions of dollars. And we also had, at the same time, competing goals of continuing to operate the International Space Station and then build another vehicle that would allow us to leave low Earth orbit, which the shuttle, despite its complexity and how an amazing vehicle it was, there was nothing you could do to ever use it to go to the moon. So we had to make a choice. And basically, and I was actually on the group in Washington, D.C. that was trying to decide what to do and make some recommendations, specifically with regards to how many shuttle missions we should continue to fly. And we had all these international commitments. We were building the space station, and so we had 3 programs that needed money, and we only had money for 2 of those programs out of the 3. So we just made really the president at the time, which was President Bush, decided that we were going to cancel the space shuttle program, and that's what we did. And if I had to make that decision, I probably would have done the same thing. In the same situation where if you don't have the money, you got to make hard choices sometimes.
Okay, I think I have time for one more quick question, and this is from James' 5th grade class in Corpus Christi School in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. So what advice would you give to students who aspire to be part of history as future astronauts, engineers, researchers, and scientists? Besides study, read, follow your
But you got to have some fun too, right?
Yeah.
Along the way.
Well, reading can be fun. I learned that when
Absolutely.
I was a kid. Reading is fundamental.
I watched the same commercials in New Jersey where I grew up.
Yes.
I think it's important to have goals, even goals you think you might not be able to achieve. Right. And just, never give up and never take no for an answer, and, work hard. And hopefully you'll achieve them. There's, certainly, sometimes people say, well, there's a lot of luck involved in things, but, then you also hear that saying that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so if that's what luck is, I think I've had some luck myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would just add that, especially for young kids, and I teach at a university now, and at Columbia University, and I interact with younger kids as well. I think that it's important to just try to be resilient. It's a complicated world you live in. I think there's a lot of expectations on kids in school. They're trying to do lots of stuff. And, Scott said, try to have a little fun. I think that's important too, but also be good to yourselves. If you're not doing well at something, it's not because it's not because you're stupid. It's because it's hard to learn in school. The hardest thing I had to ever do, and Scott mentioned that as well in his case. To me, the hardest thing I ever had to do was learn in school. That is hard. Cram new stuff inside of your head and understand it. And whether I was in elementary school or in graduate school at MIT, it still was tough. So I think just realize that when you want to do something cool and pursue a tough field, it's going to be challenging, and you may not do as well as you like all the time, but that's okay. It's more important to stick with it. And successful people aren't those that never fail, they're those who never let failure stop them. So you run into rough patches, get help, and keep going.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, something I've always tried to do is surround yourself with people that are better than you. That, you know, together you can achieve bigger things. I think
That's easy for Mike to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, for Scott, that's impossible. For Scott, I don't know how he could do that. So that would be impossible. For me, it's pretty easy.
I was trying to beat you to that joke.
Yeah, I was waiting, man. I was ready. But I was going to turn it around. I was going to say, for you, that's impossible. You can't find anybody.
I'm glad I could set that joke up for you guys.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to, we're coming to the end of our time, and I just want to thank you both for joining me here in this virtual space. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I've enjoyed both your books tremendously. I will read them again because good books I always read more than once. And thank you. Now you're still at Columbia. Are you a professor at Columbia, Mike?
I am. Yeah, we taught remotely the second part of the semester after our spring break in March. We went to online, and students did their projects online, and it all worked out. So yeah, we'll see but yeah, that's what I'm still doing. And I want to thank you, John, for being our moderator. You had the tough job here, and you know, we didn't get to ask you too many questions, but you have a wonderful book as well, and really appreciate you doing this for us. And a very, very cool shirt. It looks like a Hubble image is on your shirt.
Yeah, if you zoom in close enough, yeah.
I think it's a bunch of galaxies or something.
Probably.
But thanks very much for doing this, and thanks to
absolutely
Penguin Random House.
I think John is going to join us now. Our producer, thank you, John Clinton, for.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just want to do a quick wrap up to say thank you to Scott, to Mike, to John. This has really been a cool conversation. Thank you to everyone at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum for co-producing this event with us. And thanks to everyone watching. You've been a great audience. So we got a lot of great questions and comments in the chat. And I'll say one last time, remember you can find all these authors' wonderful books on barnesandnoble.com or wherever books are sold. So that's it for now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to you all, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.